Hi. I'm Dylan Wilbanks. I am recently, I've been moving around a number of different companies and startups. I've been in the web for about 15 years, and I just went to Energy Savvy, which is a energy startup in Seattle. We have these really cool dinosaur logos. Everyone loves them. Everyone loves dinosaurs. So John came to me and said, so you come into Open Web Camp? I said, sure. He's like, great, you're speaking. And at the time, I went, OK, great, I'll do a talk on user experience. And I looked at all the talks that were available and being done in the past and went, that's just going to stick out like a sore thumb. So I threw a topic up and didn't know what was going to appear. So a couple of little caveats here, or huge ones perhaps. I have almost no answers for what I'm about to talk about, and I have almost no takeaways, almost. But this, for me, is really about issues I've been seeing over and over again, first as a web developer, and then as a user experience designer, working in startups, working in software. And, well, let me start here. Let's start with Philadelphia, right? How many of you all have actually, if ever seen this street? This is Broad Street. It's the north-south primary thoroughfare through downtown Philadelphia. And what's unusual about it, especially when you know the age of Philadelphia, is that it is a freaking wide street, right? 2 cars, a huge median, big offset from the sides of the roads, big city hall down the middle of it. It's incredibly wide. And it all has to do with that guy who's stuck at the top of the city hall there, a man by the name of William Penn, whom you all might know as the guy who's on the side of the Quaker Oats box, but was also the guy who helped found the colony we now call Pennsylvania. And he and others of his generation had been through a certain disaster called the Great Fire of London in 1666. Now, the Great Fire of London, of course, destroyed most of what we call the city, eventually led to the rebuilding of what we call modern London, but they remember what happened, and they were not going to let that happen to their new colony. So they designed Philadelphia with 2 incredibly wide streets, Broad Street and Market Street, to segment this town into quarters. The idea being that if the fire were to start in the bottom left-hand corner here, once it got to City Hall, it would have no ability to jump. It would just be too far wide. So it's perfect. They built themselves a fireproof city, right? Not exactly. See, in multiple times, Philadelphia had fires. This is the 1865 fire, which destroyed 2 city blocks. This was during the middle of the Civil War. It killed a number of people. Big issue. But mind you, they had 3 fires that destroyed small number of blocks. Compare it, this fire in 1865, to another notorious fire in 1871, which, as you all know, destroyed pretty much most of Chicago. Philadelphia was built with wide streets and brick. Chicago and Seattle and San Francisco were built a lot around wood. And Chicago and San Francisco and Seattle all learned their lessons. And we call these things building codes. They have the rules for how you do built environment in terms of seismic, in terms of fire prevention, in terms of egress, in terms of basic rules. In Seattle, a house has to be 19 feet back from the street. Why? To allow not only that offset, but also because they don't want houses crowding right up against the side of the road. It's an aesthetic thing. These rules are the rules that govern the built space everywhere in the world. Every place, every major industrial place has these rules. We even have rules as a, you know, on a higher level. So what about the web, right? I mean, we've been building this for 20 years, right? Well, hang on here, hang on. Building codes would never work for building code, right? Right? I mean, it's different, right? I mean, the built environment's planned, right? I mean, think about it, right? You want to build yourself a tower, right? You want to park this up in the middle of a major city. Well, you have an architect, you've got engineers, you've got structural engineers, you've got everybody who all gets together with the person who wants it built and the city planners and everyone else, and they go, we want to build a 100-story skyscraper. Here's how it's going to be. And in the case of the Freedom Tower, it took them a decade. But there are rules. And when you're done, right? Well, development, that's not pre-planned, right? I mean, after all, what is development but a certain thing down the road from us here called the Winchester Mystery House? Right? Which, how many of you all know the story of the Winchester Mystery House? Yeah, right? And everything the door to nowhere. And any of us who write code, any of us who design, we know where the doors to nowhere lie inside of our code. We know where the doors to nowhere lie inside of our design, right? And it could be anything from internationalization, where the moment you put a word in German, it's going to blow up the top navigation, to, you know, there was that one idiot who didn't really know how to code a backend database query, and they sent it through as a clear string on the URL. I actually saw that. As an aside, my sister-in-law tried to get me to sign up for this book club, and I started punching things in, and I discovered it was sending my username and my password as part of the open query string. It was really hard to explain to her why I refused to sign up. But why don't we deal with these things? Well, it all comes down to the basic rule of all things. What's on fire today, right? Well, what is on fire today? Let's go over our hierarchy of startup code needs, right? We're going to do our startup. We got to get through our day-to-day with our millions of dollars of investment. So what's the first thing you're going to do? Well, obviously, you're going to ship working code, right? I mean, it's got to keep working. All right, that's good. What are we going to do? Let's go fix some bugs. Good. OK, now we're doing well. If we get time, we'll fix those bugs. What else should we do? Well, if we can get those things done, we'll build some new features. OK, sounds pretty cool. And then, if we get the time, we'll deal with our technical debt, or whatever debt that comes with it. So to understand why these things are the way they are, let's look at these things from a financial perspective. Shipping working code, well, that's money, right? Fixing your bugs in your working code, that's more money. Building new features, well, as any product manager will tell you, it's all about making it rain. So what does that leave the technical debt? Well, it doesn't really do any of these things. So it's just no money. Therefore, many, many problems, right? And a broken slide. Let's talk about debt. Because we all know debt, right? We all know about Ward Cunningham's original metaphor, which was we start with this problem of technical debt, and we defer, and we defer. And it's just like debt. You're actually paying things down with the idea that later you'll have to pay it back with interest. So as an example, one of the developers in my last organization told me this one day. 6 years ago, I was asked how long it'd take for me to internationalize our code base. I said 2 weeks. But we didn't do it. Now it would take months of work with multiple developers. And why is that? Because when he started, he had only a few lines of code, a few pieces of Java to work with. Now this thing was hundreds of thousands of lines long. And you know, it's not just code. It goes beyond that, right? I mean, we talk about tech debt, but there's also design debt. There's accessibility debt, internationalization debt, security debt, DevOps. You can think about any number of pieces of debt around this, right? Feature debt. I mean, we know tech debt, right? Code upgrades, refactoring, the temporary hacks we have to do because it's 4:30 in the afternoon and we got to flip it out the door. Going through a stack of code and looking at all the to-dos that are marked all over the place, that's always fun. And of course, just the basic not staying up to date. So on my side of the house, on the UX side, we have the same sort of things. Poor usability, right? We just leave it. Suboptimal user flows. I can show you any number of them in products that I've used where it's just, why are there 47 steps to do something that every other product only takes 3? The mobile problem, right? I mean, how many what's mobiles? How many of you all get the endless loops? And it's like, there's just not a lot of thinking about that. The concept of experience rot, where you keep adding more and more features and update the features that are there before, and pretty soon you've got 11 million buttons on the screen, right? And then what I call the patch and paint versus the knock down the wall problems, right? Which spins back into experience rot. Well, the best thing to do is to refactor the information architecture and the taxonomy. Well, we don't have time for that. What are we going to do? Add another button. Accessibility has the same problem, right? Doesn't work with a screen reader. Well, that's a problem. A lot of these AJAX and post-AJAX sites don't have ARIA hooks to pull in screen readings, to be able to let people know that things are changing on the screen. Oftentimes, accessibility is never tested. It's never even a priority, and which all stems back to that great old, are they the 80% case problem, right? Which, of course, we know what that leads to. You start saying things like that, and you get yourself sued, which the National Federation for the Blind is more than happy nowadays to do, which, more power to them. I wish they did it more, but it's a horrible place to be. But here's the awful truth, right? You will never not have debt. Why? It's easy, right? There are not infinite resources, and you don't have infinite revenue. You have to make a choice. You're a startup. You want to just get to market. You just want to sell. What are you going to do? Accessibility, or build the base number of features you need to do to get the VCs to say, yeah, I'm willing to put some money behind this, right? You have 3 hours to fix a problem with the navigation. What are you going to do, right? You have 11,000 things that need to get shipped out the door because people are breathing down your neck. Are you going to do that, or are you going to try to refactor for HTML5? Right? So it leads to this is one of my favorite buildings. I went to the University of Colorado, and there's a building on campus called Temporary Building Number 1. Temporary Building Number 1 is over 100 years old. It is made of brick. It is very much not temporary. Why is it called Temporary Building Number 1? Well, because they were supposed to knock it down. It was used originally as a hospital, but then they decided that they needed the space for other things. So they decided we're going to get rid of it. So we're going to call it Temporary Building 1, and it'll go. That was 1959. It's still there. It's now considered part of the Claire Small building. It's because they built the Claire Small building onto it, but it's still called Temporary Building Number 1. Think about all the things you do in your code where you're like, this is a temporary design. No one's ever going to do it. And then 10 years later, you're still shipping it. So we go through all these things. At the same time, though, we know, right? Poor architecture. It kills velocity. It kills sales at times, too. You know, we have to keep up with every change in market, every change in user, every change in device. If we don't plan for internationalization, we know it's costly. Lord help us if we have to do it in German. You know, bad security mistakes have cost us money and face. How many times does that happen every week? And on the accessibility side, it costs us face and it costs us money. I mean, you know, I was talking to somebody about LinkedIn having an article this week about the inaccessibility of their mobile site, with their mobile app. Sorry, Jennison. So what does that lead to? Well, we're right back where we started, weren't we? What's on fire today? Well, the whole damn town. So what are we going to do? So my thought really was, and has been for a long time, that we need a building code for the web, right? Well, let's think about the principles of what a building code is, right? In any situation, in any building, you have to be able to make one of three decisions, right? Whether you're going to retrofit, whether you're going to replace, or whether you're going to have new construction. So if you think about retrofit, this is an example here of a bridge. Pretty much every bridge in Metro Seattle has had to do this. The support columns below the crossbeam of this road bridge have been put in what's called a jacket. And the reason why it's put in what's called a jacket is because when they made the columns, they were hollow. Why were they hollow? Because it was cheap to make a hollow concrete column. What's the one little problem with hollow concrete columns? One little earthquake, they go. So what's the solution? You go and you actually wrap them in these metal jackets so that the metal keeps the column from popping. It's actually cheaper to do this than it is to replace the columns. So this is an example of a classic retrofit, right? Replace, well, you guys pretty much know this one, right? I mean, the Bay Bridge was outright replaced. Why was it replaced? Because the old East Link was structurally deficient. What's the solution? You replace it, and you get rid of the old one. And then as for new construction, well, I can tell you about South Lake Union in Seattle, which originally was just a bunch of houses and industrial parks, and now is nothing but Amazon, biotech, and any number of condos. These have all popped up in the last decade, but every one of them is built to withstand an earthquake of 7 or more, which, by the way, we are due for as part of the subduction fault, the Cascadia quake that we all are dreading and fearing, and is the reason why I refuse to now go on vacation to the Oregon coast. I've watched one too many tsunami videos. But every one of these things is built to a new standard and new practice. When you build a new building, you follow the rules. And with that come things like standard sizes and standard practice, which we all know about in terms of building, right? I mean, wood, for instance, right? I mean, wood comes in standard sizes, 2x4, 2x6, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we know that if we do that, we can also have standards, for instance, on doors, right? What's the fire resistance of a door? They're rated, they're known, they're actually tagged and marked on the door. And if they're all standard and they're all under a certain practice, then old Tom Silver from This Old House will tell you how to install a new one. Why? Because installing a pre-hung door is exactly the same in my house as it is in your house. Mind you, there's some shimmying and jimmying, a few other things you're going to have to do, and of course, in the case of my house, one side is a 1/4 inch lower than the other, but let's leave that aside for the moment. The point being that, great, now I can build all this stuff. It's awesome, right? So, you know, we need to think about this, though, if we're going to do a code. We have to get beyond web standards and beyond frameworks, right? This is about true practice, right? I mean, practice. As Alan Iverson once told us. Indeed, how are you supposed to make the web better with practice? So I'm not saying this as somebody who does not support the W3C, does not support WCAG, 508, or any number of things that we've done over the years to standardize code. I am a huge standardista. But we've got to take another step, right? We set the rules. So when are we going to put the rules where they belong, which is in how we build everything? I mean, accessibility, you have to sue somebody, right? Now, this is a problem that we've dealt with in accessibility for a long, long time. And it all comes down to, well, you educate and you sue, right? Internationalization, we kind of have practices and there are people who can run around and fix these problems. User experience. Do you know how many user experience people Amazon now employs? It's like 1/3 of the company. I know because they called me for interviews about once a week. We want good practice. That's beyond the idea of having rules, right? I mean, yeah, jQuery is good, but are you going to keep jQuery updated? What happens when you do and it breaks something? What's going to be the cadence for doing that, right? So what can we do? I mean, that's the hard question, right? We have to come up with a way of doing best practices, of integrating them all into some sort of code, and providing it to people in a way that can be regularly updated, regularly understood, and people have to keep up with it. And I'm not really sure there's a good answer. And I can tell you part of the reason why I don't think there's a really good answer. I used to teach at the university level. And I used to watch kids walk in who were learning web stuff in school, and they were still learning how to design in tables. And they were still learning font tags. And then it got worse when I actually saw the syllabus I was supposed to teach from, which included things like using current and up-to-date web standards like XML to build websites. And I'm staring at this thing going, XML? It's 2011. We're behind. We're not pushing good practice, and we're expecting people to keep up, and we change every 5 seconds. And a lot of us who've kind of reached my age, which is getting longer in the tooth and have been in this industry for a long time, get that feeling of, can we keep up and can we learn? So I'm not really sure there's a perfect answer. But I do think that I have one answer for one of the problems I've been running into. So here's my little part for UX and for how we do things. And I call it Storycore. Mind you, I'm from Seattle. It's home of Microsoft, and therefore I feel obliged to actually call it 2014 Home Edition Live 365. Pre-alpha preview. So this actually is very, very unfinished, and I'm not willing to provide it yet. But let me walk you through what I'm basically running into. In my last job, I discovered that a lot of what I was doing was just repeating things over and over again. Up here you see a line for nuts and bolts as an epic, and it's bare bones requirements for products. What are nuts and bolts? Well, it turns out the blocking and tackling pieces of building any website are pretty much the same, right? You need if you're going to have a web application, you've got to have logins. Okay, if you have logins, what do you have to do with logins? There's CRUD operations. Okay, well, that's a pretty straightforward thing. What about security? Well, that's actually pretty straightforward too. What's the lost password pattern? Well, there's a few of them, but they're all pretty standard. That's just the basic pieces of things. You can go beyond that. What's on the home page? There's a structure that's there in terms of how we lay these things out and how we write the user stories. So I thought, that's perfect. I'll just start writing the user stories. So this is the principle here of being able to do the classical, what we call persona goal value structure in stories. As a speaker, I want to give a good talk so people won't walk out on me, right? And then be able to give the steps around it to say, well, what's the acceptance criteria for that? I'll know it's done when none of you get up. It's okay. I'm not going to hurt anybody. So what is Story? So the idea is it's essentially a bootstrap for applications, right? So I put the nuts and bolts pieces in place for a basic web application. It's importable. So we'll throw it into GitHub. We'll do what we need to do. The key pieces for user experience are going to be there, but on top of that, we can bake in things like accessibility and security and internationalization and all these other things we know need to be there. Maybe there are things you can still defer, but there are things you're going to have to face. And if you face them earlier, you know you have to. I can tell you, the biggest problem with technical debt, with design debt, with any of these things, is the unknown unknown, right? We know that especially with security. The unknown unknown kills us all the time because the unknown unknown is something we cannot plan for. But we know there are known unknowns when it comes to things like design. We know there are known unknowns when it comes to code. We can plan for that. So when am I going to ship this? Soonish. I'm still going to try to nail it. I'm hoping to get this done. I was chucking my way through it, set it aside last night and went, you know what, I should just go ahead and tell people about what I'm trying to do. So I'll throw it up in GitHub soon, and I'll put something up on my Twitter account to let people know about that. So that's what I'm going to do. What are you guys going to do? I mean, we know about the debt issue, right? We know all these forms of debt. We also know we're confronting all these doors. So how do we get to this? How do we get there? And that's kind of what I'm looking at you for. I don't have an answer to the question. I've answered one part of the question for myself. But look at everything else we do. We have got to figure out how exactly we're going to start building the fire breaks into the code. We're going to figure out how we're going to bake accessibility in. Is it by building better frameworks or improving the frameworks we already have? Perhaps. Is it by being more stringent about standards? Perhaps. Is it about education? Perhaps. But I'm not really sure. Because I can tell you that over the last 15 years, we've tried and we've tried and we've tried. And we get better every day, but we're still a long way from being able to avoid Great Fire of London scenarios in our web, in our applications. We've got to get away from that. We've got to get towards small fires, small issues, so we can start getting the velocity we need to really move this forward, right? I mean, after all, this is for everyone, right? The entire point of the web, you could argue, is the leveling and democratization of the world. Now, the problem with the leveling and democratization of the world is that people write bad code. Why? Because it's level and democratic. You can make bad decisions. So how do we build good decisions and how do we enforce good decisions? My argument would be we got to figure out how to do it from the start. We got to figure out how to build a real building code around these things. But the rest of it, honestly, it's up to you. I'm just a user experience designer. What do I know? Anyway, thank you. So that went a lot quicker than I thought it would, but I've got plenty of time apparently now for questions, arguments, and threats. So I think, I mean, you're right. Building codes do, the question being, you know, building codes choke out innovation. How do you avoid that? Well, it's true. They typically do. At the same time, we also have seen any number of buildings that meet code that are quite innovative. And I think really the best way to do it is to split that difference, right, between we can still be innovative and we can still build the code. You can build a beautiful building that's fireproof. I mean, that's going to be fire resistant and give people the right egresses, you know. There's a building outside of where I grew up in Oklahoma called the Price Tower that Frank Lloyd Wright built. It's 14 stories tall. It does not have fire escapes that would work for a skyscraper. It is a beautiful building and utterly useless in the modern era, right? But that's a decision that you have to make. You have to figure out how to thread that needle. Do I think it chokes out innovation? Sure, but at the same time, it doesn't choke out that much innovation because clearly everything that's built around here does not look identical. It all looks a little bit different. I think we can still get there. I think the real question is going to be at what point and how are we going to maintain that innovation? Because we aren't still done building the ideas of what the web is. We're only 20 years in, right?
You use the analogy of fire a lot. Of course, fire is a...
Perhaps, but also, perhaps not, right? I mean, a poorly built, poorly deployed emergency website will kill people if they can't get the information out fast enough, right?
So there's one corner case.
So let's turn it this way, theft, right? Why do we lock our doors in our house, right? I mean, I got broken into a few years ago because a guy climbed through the bathroom window. I'd left it open and I'd completely forgotten about it. It was a little thing, right? And I always look at that as like, it's just like a software hole, you idiot. Software being some punk kid. Maybe it's, you know, fire is primal, but so is theft. I mean, how many times, quick question. How many of you all have had your credit card number changed twice in the last year? Of those, how many of it is because of Target? Right? I mean, that's obviously off to the side a little bit.
Sure.
But, sorry, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think for me, I've been through those battles with marketers, with product managers. And when those things are going to keep popping up left and right, they're going to push out real issues. And the more we can get ahead of the issues of keeping things up and running and maintained, the less they're going to get pushed aside by crazy, angry marketers who are afraid of things going on, or product managers who really want this thing shipped yesterday. Yeah, that's always a pain in the rear, I can tell you. I had somebody the other day asking me, so how long should it take should we wait to see if somebody's actually read the web page? And I said, well, Don Norman says 10 to 20 seconds is the average time someone spends on a web page. Like, so what number are we supposed to go with? I'm like, 12. Why? I don't know. I just pulled the number out of my head. There are some things you can measure in terms, like in UX, we measure this all the time in terms of like what's the responsive, how responsive is a site. We can measure things around, say, color contrast for accessibility. So there are some things we can measure, but you're right, there is still a lot of opinion. And there still is a lot of eyeballing it and figure out what the best thing to do is. But even in building, we do that, right? One end of my door is a 1/4 inch lower than the other end of the door. It won't take a standard frame. So how do you deal with that? Well, in the case of the guy who was installing the door for me, he took a sledgehammer and tried to beat down a 1/4 inch on one side of it. Is that the right way to do it? Absolutely not, right? Because the next thing I know, the inspector, we were renting, we're thinking about buying it, he looks at it and goes, yeah, what's the spalling off of the foundation there? And I go, it looks like somebody took a sledgehammer and hit right there a few times. And I'm like, yeah, I think that happened. So like in a case like, there are cases like that where, yeah, there are certainly opinions, but there are decisions that you can take and then the decisions you probably should take. And I think that part of the practice isn't yet built out, right? Putting it to an exact number, it needs to be 19 feet away. I think we'll eventually get there in terms of responsiveness, right? In terms of things like how do you deal with a particular set of browsers and a particular set of website and a lot of other things and what color should it be, et cetera, I think we'll always be dealing with those problems. But building is as much about aesthetics and opinion as it is about doing it right.
I just want to say that it seemed like you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not anti-frameworks. I think doing that, it's easy to do it at a university or a corporate level, right? It's harder to do it on an overall level. And the other thing too is, you got to keep up, right? And how many jQuery updates do we have? And every time they do it, there's usually a security thing I they're deprecating something else, and it's changing the code that you've written on top of it. So, I mean, I think there's a big spot for frameworks in this puzzle, huge spot for frameworks. But I think the key thing around frameworks is that we have to do them in a reasonable and sensible way and make sure that people are willing to take them and use them, right? I mean, we need to get to a point where a corporate standard is reasonable as people using the web, right? We're all cool if using Bootstrap, if Bootstrap's built right. I've seen what the code that Angular produces, regardless of the previous session. We all kind of look at it and go, that's not web standards. So, it's the same sort of, we've got to figure out how to thread that needle and split that difference. Dennis, were you going to rant or yell at me?
Yeah, thanks. Frameworks, I tried that route too. They won't let me teach at a university because I don't have a PhD, it's ironic.
I know the same feeling.
Yeah, exactly.
But I would actually like to tie your and Dennis's comments together because I think you just threaded something through interesting, which was we've got to teach these people, God, I hate GWT. Sorry, anybody here from Google? I'm really sorry. We have to teach them how to build good HTML, how to actually, when their frameworks need to spit out good things, right? And we've done a really poor job of that, I can tell you. Yeah. So. So who here is a licensed web designer or developer? Could I get a show of hands? Who here is AIW, American Institute of Web Designers? Nobody? Oh, great, great.
Institute, American Institute of Web Designers?
Yeah, sure. Sure, I just made it up. But yeah, I mean, and you know, that is one of those good points. It's like we're still not, it isn't really that the pain point where if a website goes down, it's going to kill hundreds of people by the sheer fact it caught on fire and collapsed on top of them. At the same time, these things are becoming so integral to our lives that perhaps licensing may come. You know, we are already seeing the closing of this first age of the web as companies, these big corporations, come in and start taking over. You know, the end of net neutrality might be soon. And if so, then you can see a situation where we're going to all get licensed. So it's a two-edged sword, right? On the one hand, you have to actually have something to do this. On the other hand, the gate's going to get awfully small, and we're going to lose that democratization. Yeah, I mean, I know for sure that OPSEC, especially in large enterprise companies like I've worked in, there are clear rules that you have to follow in order to get certified so you can actually bid on RFPs. And for some companies, we now know you can be insured against security issues. I mean, part of how Target is making up for their idiocy last year is insurance is paying for part of it, but the premiums just went up. And everyone's looking around at them going, well, if it's going to be, who's going to be next? So there's got to be a way to tie that cost to it, you know? And you know, the idea of lost dollars, I mean, the one problem, of course, is like accessibility. It's really hard to tie lost dollars to it. We tell stories of, well, you know, 20% of people have a visual deficiency, and that's going to cause a problem. But at the same time, you know, that's the problem of, are you going to do the right thing, or are you going to figure out a way to actually monetize that in a reasonable way? So, two things around that. One is that the place I'm currently working at, I was hired on because they never had anyone who did design before. And they are now in a position where they understand the problem that they're in, that they need more design. And they also understand that the venture capitalists and everybody else are expecting that now. So the solution is put someone in charge who can help drive that. Accessibility, I've heard similar things with organizations. But that's a money question, right? I mean, that's really how, you know, our market, the people who are going to pay for our stuff, right? On the other side, though, I would almost turn back to frameworks, right? We know what we use to build with. Can we, when we start generating new frameworks from scratch, is it possible for us to get a set of best practices in place at the start so that they are being built correctly? I mean, there's this, you know, it's that balance again between, do you want to let an organic thing rise, or do you want to try to do it pre-planned, right? Do you want to end up with more PHP, even though PHP pretty much drives most of the web nowadays? But we all know what a pile of fun that is structurally. Or do you want to get something that's more planned? But then when you're planning, are you going to be able to pick everything up at the start? I'm not really sure, but I'm starting to sense that we have to get to the point where we understand what the basic nuts and bolts are of things overall, so that, you know, when we start building frameworks, we know what to do. So that when we start doing these startups, when we start building new sites, when we start pulling things out of the box, we know exactly what needs to happen. Part of that is education. Part of that is just knowing what the right thing to do is. I mean, like I said, I don't really have an answer. My feeling is it's a mix of everything we've done before and trying to find another path through. We have, you know, is it mobile? Is it something further along that we haven't seen? I don't know. But if we keep going down this road, you know, we're going to be in the same place in 10 years with 10 times the tech debt we had now, 10 times the design debt. Because every time we start one, we're going to be in the same damn position. How do we solve that? Your answer. Like, one more question. Yeah, that is, I mean, I'm not really sure. I mean, we need a best practice around that for sure. I mean, how many, I think 3 different sites tell me that I had a, with bleeding heart. What was it called? Heartbleed, thank you. Sorry about that. One of those things. 3 different ways that they came to me. One of which I didn't even find out about until somebody had sent me a page. It's like, oh yeah, and they probably got compromised. I mean, there's a pattern that we haven't even figured out yet. No one seems to have a good best practice around it. I'm not really sure there's a good answer, but we need to figure that part out too. And then that comes actually back to emergency preparedness, right? I mean, the fire happens elsewhere in the system. How are you going to deal with it? So, sorry. We're over, so thank you.